All right. Welcome to the first live, well, not the first, the next live edition or this live edition of the Event Marketing Show. I'm Mike Carroll, as always, your host. And today, I'm always excited to talk about what we're talking about. But we have a very special guest, Rafat Ali, founder and CEO of Skift. What we're going to explore today, which I'm kind of, is a topic that's I don't want to say it's beat to death, but it's become more and more important over the last year. And it's en masse. It's talking about content, but content in the context of, events and more specifically hybrid events. So I'd like to welcome to the EMS stage, Rafat. It's nice to see you.
You too. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So we only have a limited time, so I kind of want to jump right in. Why don't we start off by, most of our audience, I think, knows who you are, but I'd love to get the brief summary of how you got here and where you are now and what you're doing, because you've got a long and super interesting career.
Yeah, and let me mention right up front, we are SpotMe clients, happy SpotMe clients for I think since last year, early on, whenever we started doing virtual events. So thank you to Pierre and the team, and that they've been very, very good to work with. So that's been going great. Skift is my second company. I built and sold a previous company called Paid Content. Started as a blog covering the business of paid content. Early in 2002 is when I started. That expanded into a media company covering the business of content, media, information, entertainment, and how they were going at that point online. And then mobile came along, and video came along. So I covered the newspaper industry and the changes. I covered what happened with the music industry and the changes. I covered the book industry and the changes. So very much sort of industry content being the common thread across it. That's what Paid Content turned from a blogger in a bedroom to a media company with, when we at a peak, we were about 20-something people, 25 people. And then that was from 2002, 2008 is when I sold it to the Guardian Media Group out of UK. And this was right before the crash happened. So 4 months before the crash happened.
Excellent timing.
So very good timing on that. Yeah. And then obviously when the crash happened, they were laying off hundreds of people back in UK. So we unfortunately were cut to size as well. And so I was there till 2010, traveled for 2 years between 2010 and 2012 in my then single life. Met my wife along the way, and now wife along the way, and started Skift in summer 2012. So we're coming up to, in fact, next year will be at 10 years of doing this. Oh, wow. So Skift covers the business of travel. Quick, I would say the easiest way to say is we're the Bloomberg of travel, news, research, conferences, marketing services to the travel industry, including the event industry as well. Not only are we event organizers ourselves, because obviously we do events as part of Skift. I did that as part of my previous company. But I think many of you know we bought Event MB, that was the foremost blog covering the event industry and event tech industry, turned into a media company that we bought almost 2 years ago now, and that we're now continuing. Miguel Neves is the editor-in-chief of that now. And so we're very invested in the event industry in all possible ways. And almost 9 years in, we are a fully distributed company. We went fully remote with the pandemic, and our events, which was a big part of our revenues, about 40 to 45% of our revenues pre-COVID, all physical, as you can imagine. Sure. We pivoted quickly to virtual events and have been doing virtual events since. Our first physical event or hybrid event back is Skift Global Forum, which is our flagship conference that we do in New York in mid-September. So bringing it back as a smaller physical, and then obviously virtual as well. We're using SpotMe as a platform for that as well. So we'll be, our first experience. I'm learning as much about hybrid events from everybody organizing it today. As I think happened with virtual as well. We're all learning from each other on simple things like, oh, we should put a caption because that other company's putting a caption in their video. Right. Or that other company's putting sponsors on the screen. Oh, we should do that too. So there's a lot of cross-learning that we're doing. I'm sure all of the event organizers are doing that. We will learn with our first hybrid event and then hopefully improve from there.
Yeah, necessity always being the mother of invention. I think one of the most endearing things about the last year, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I know we're all ready to move on from that. But it is, how information and knowledge has been shared like across this
Correct.
community, and
Yeah,
how
that has been incredible.
Yeah, and EventMD's been at the center of that, and I think it's really excellent. There's enough at the table for everyone to eat, so to speak. So, okay, let's jump into something real quick, which you just mentioned that you guys are bringing back. Your live event, your flagship event in New York, but it's going to be a smaller in-person event. And we had the chance to talk a little bit before we jumped on today. And one of the things we talked about was the new role of content. As we're moving into this hybrid context, right? Mm-hmm. The idea, of course, that we all experience in our daily entertainment lives, where most content that we consume is on demand, at our fingertips whenever we want it. And so my question is, in this new context, what do you feel like is the new role of event content? Mm. It's no longer just a singular sort of like one point in time. And what have you learned from virtual? And now as you're planning sort of your first flagship hybrid event, about the role of content?
Yeah, so our conferences were always editorial conferences. They're an extension of the journalism and the reporting that we do on skift.com. This was true in my previous company as well. Yeah. When you ask people why do they attend conferences, I think you know this very well, majority of people say or did say prior to the pandemic, it was for the networking. And if you go to any industry conference, particularly trade or association type conferences, most of the people were in the hallways versus the program going on. I'm giving a very general overview. That's not true for very broad overview. That's not true for everything. For our conferences, I would humbly say the majority of people during the sessions were in the sessions. That was what we were always very focused on, making sure that editorial on stage was so great that people would there. And obviously we had networking time built in and lunches and dinners and all the other stuff that a lot of other people do as well. The thing that has been hopefully proven over the last year is the importance of content and editorial as the glue that holds everything together. In an online environment, networking is still, we're still in very early stages of networking becoming and networking tech, networking methodologies. I think all of us are learning. I think a lot of tech is yet to be invented on the networking side.
Sure.
VR, AR, all that stuff will definitely play into it. I think we did a story yesterday on EventMD, like what's the role of VR even as the physical events come back. And if you ask me what the answer is, I didn't read that article. I just read the headline, so I can't tell you what the article said. But you should go on eventmd.com to read that.
We'll drop it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and so I forgot the thread that I was working on. But
no, it's okay.
The prominence of editorial has been proven 10 times over in the last year, with an idea that event companies or event organizers that used to only think of event content in discrete units over those 1 or 2 or 3, whatever number of days, now need to think in a 360 fashion. A lot of large event companies over the last 10 years have actually sold off their media assets and focused just on events, which many of them have been rethinking on, we just our touch points to our consumers, which used to be, which only used to be X number of days. Now we need to figure out how it is 365, because in a virtual event, one, the money isn't there. That is just, the pot of money for virtual is smaller. So you need more money, but you need more touch points for that to happen. And so that touch points is, the media part of it. So that's why I think that in many ways, media organizers like us that have events as part of it seem to have adjusted faster to this world. And the large event companies for the first 6-8 months were in denial, and they said, the events are coming back in fall last year. That was when the last year happened. Obviously that didn't happen at all. So I do think though that obviously physical events are coming back with ferociousness right now. It's certainly in US. I think Florida is probably ground zero today for events, just because the restrictions there are a lot less than other parts of the country as well. So we'll see what happens over the next 6 to 8 months. I think this fall is going to be probably the busiest fall in physical events history.
Yeah, I think
in
there's
terms of
a
events.
deep thirst for people to get out of the house and want to go to anything.
To anything that is.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Matter.
So I just hope that the prominence of editorial continues, selfishly for our company, but
Sure.
also for the industry at large. But now editorial is not just those few days. It could be leading up to the event. It could be post-event, things that I think you and I will talk about this as well. But we have to start thinking about this, the event content in a continuum as opposed to just those few days.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I want to touch on one thing before we jump into that, but I think that's probably the most important thing for our audience that we can talk about is like what that continuum looks like, how to leverage the content produced during an event, whether that's your hybrid content or your virtual content as component of, excuse me, of the live event itself. But the one thing I wanted to ask that you mentioned is that, you said that your events have been editorial driven and that the reason people were coming was for that editorial content. So 2 questions for our audience. One, what do you mean by editorial content? So the people have a good definition of that.
Right.
And then the second question, which is probably the more important one, I think, is do you think this last blip on the radar and now the this sort of renewed desire for human connection, which I think everybody feels, and events are a way to do that, changes the motivation for why people choose to either engage an event virtually now or come in person?
Yeah, very good point. The second one, I don't know the answer today, but the first one, what editorial, and I'll try and come up with some answers.
Sure, well, it could be something different for a lot of people.
But for the first one, editorial for us means our journalists on stage interviewing an industry person, CEO of Marriott, CEO of Delta Airlines, could be a panel for, could be debate format, could be a TED type talk that somebody's doing as well. So this is very editorial driven conference. Obviously sponsors are also integrated as part of that, whether what we call brand talks, where it's clearly labeled that it's a sponsor driven thing, but we put a lot of care into making sure it's not a pitch. So editorial, like even our sponsored sessions, we make sure it's not a pitch for the company. It's a soft sell, and they bring their clients to talk about what larger industry issues. So for us, that is editorial.
Okay.
It's the insights. We're hoping that the Delta CEO is going to say something. We do preps with them. This is our journalist talking. The PR people on Delta side know that potentially they'll break news, hopefully. Because we do it in New York, this is, I'm giving an example of Skift Global Forum. A lot of mainstream media is there as well. So sure. CNBC is live from there. Bloomberg is live from there. It's the biggest CEOs in travel. So these are all public companies that these channels cover. And if Delta CEO is going to say something along the lines of which he did 2 years ago, that I've tasked my team to make Wi-Fi free over the next year. That was, I think, 3 years ago, he said on stage. So that was what was leading a Bloomberg story. So Delta CEO says Wi-Fi is going to become free on all their planes, which likely means that all other airlines are going to follow that lead as well. So that's the type of editorial that we aim for, that people come for. They obviously come for connections as well. That is definitely a big part of it, but they connect through the lens of content. And, versus a trade show where it's a very intent-driven, I need X number of meetings for my sales because this is what it is. It's more thought leadership than direct response. I guess that's the analogy that I would give. In terms of your second question is, what does the role of editorial become in a physical world where people are back? I think it's a bit of what I said earlier, which we have to start thinking about it in a continuum. And whether it's, and we've tried this a little bit with our virtual events, and Clubhouse didn't turn out to be as big as people thought it would be. I think the Clubhouse bubble is already burst. I don't know if you guys follow it that much, but We were doing.
I've been paying loose attention to it. And it was one of those, sort of flash in the pan things that I was like, do I jump on board with this and check it out as a digital marketer, like as a growth marketer, or do I see if it's, sometimes it's fun to be on the beginning of things, but I let that one go, and it seems to have kind of floated away.
It's kind of floated, but the point was that you could do pre-show things, pre-event primers, or building up excitement for the conference itself, post-event hangouts, kind of like at the end of a conference there's a cocktail party. This is a virtual cocktail party idea, whether it happens on event tech software platforms or it happens on third-party platforms like Clubhouse. I think is an important thing. One of the things we also did for one of our events last year was we used SpotMe, but we did a pre-event on SpotMe to get people familiarized with the software.
Oh.
So, on morning 9 a.m. on the day of the conference, they're not just opening the software and like for the next half an hour trying to figure out how do I navigate this.
Right.
And I think that is important. I think people are beginning to get used to what event softwares look like. So maybe that gap is narrowing in terms of the learning curve. But in general, I think familiarizing with the platform prior to the event is a great idea. So that's how we're beginning to think about it. We definitely need to do better at networking in a hybrid environment, which is give more time for networking than just editorial. And no longer can we say people are paying $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 to come 3 days for listening to people on stage, and hopefully getting insights out of it or breaking news out of it. But it has to be a lot more intentional, whether it's private dinners to making sure people are being connected the right way, doing pre-matching before the event so that when they do come to the event, they're more ready, as opposed to, and I think technology is going to do a lot of that work, hopefully. And it'd be interesting where in the hybrid software, I don't know the answer to this, but like for instance, we're going to use SpotMe for our hybrid event. In that software, the people who are attending in person will also be loaded in.
Right.
Here are all the attendees. So the match will be between not just people online, but people online and offline, and people just offline among themselves as well. And so I think that softwares, and I think we're still so early in this, the event tech softwares, as their networking and matching capabilities become more robust, I think that's where a lot of magic hopefully will happen. Heavy lifting for companies like ours will happen pre-event, during the event, post-event.
What I'm curious about is like when I think about hybrid events, like the promise of hybrid to me is the opportunity to give in-person attendees more of what they came for in a shorter period of time, because you're not trying to jam in, like you said, as much editorial content as you need to in the live event, and the networking aspect, and the maybe some of the entertainment aspects that a lot of conferences have, and all those types of things. And what it allows event organizers to maybe do is and this is what I want to talk about with you, is that continuum, right? Is that if the editorial content can be stretched out across a week or a month or 6 months or a year, even leading up to a larger in-person event, do you think that is more of the way of the future, where someone is following a more personalized journey on the type of editorial content they want to consume for the event that they're looking forward to attending, for more of the in-person value that you get, the networking, the smaller maybe workshops and breakout sessions and those types of things? Or do you see it more like you and I were talking about earlier, hybrid events in the context of sporting or the Grammys or the Oscars, where actually hybrid means that your virtual audience has like sort of a unique but linear experience with the in-person crowd. Like both their experiences come together in a certain way, but they're all there for the same amount of time. They're all there for the same event. Do you see the breaking apart? Or do you see
I think it'll be a mix of both. I think there'll be different types of events. Obviously, we're talking the giant event industry, all types of events. The latter comes more easily to media companies like ours, which is a linear experience for virtual and hybrid, physical people there, and with virtual people having behind the scenes access that say the physical people may not have while they're sitting in the audience, in the auditorium. It seems like that's where a lot of media companies will go. Certainly, that's what we're going to start with. To have a continuum is an investment. It's a money investment. It's a resource investment. It's a creative investment that I think people will have a learning curve for it, because it's not what event companies are used to do.
Right.
I mean, you and I had this discussion, I think, 2 weeks ago when we first started talking about this, which is that most of the event companies are terrible at taking the content coming out of the events and doing anything after with it.
Yes. I think we all are, by the way. I think it's
everybody.
So much energy into that event, and then it happens, and everybody needs a nap because of all the work. And then there's a whole second strategy involved with all of the now recorded content to share. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I totally agree.
Correct. And I think that, the most we've learned is, offer it on demand. I mean, but like the thing that I think virtual, I don't know the answer to this, but our experience, but my suspicion is this is true across a lot of people. Live is where most of the viewing happens. In virtual has happened over the last year.
Sure.
On demand theoretically should happen a lot more, but it's not going to happen while the content is trapped in the event softwares. I think event tech companies have to become more open to sort of connecting it to other platforms like YouTube and Facebook and others that are there, third-party softwares. It also, from an event company perspective, a lot of post-event production and editorial pruning of it has to go in, which is, you just watched the 30-minute interview with Delta CEO happen at Skift Global Forum. He, catch up with it in X number of minutes.
Sure, in 3 minutes. Get the whole 30 in 3. And
correct.
Then,
And so I think a lot of that has to happen. And not just, I don't think it's just video editing down. It has to be insights. I think text plays a role in it. Audio plays a role in it. Video plays a role in it. Social media, social platforms play a role in it. Connecting dots across X number of events that you have. So it can't just be that one event that you do, but like the portfolio of events that you do and the insights that come out of it, that you can say, the CEO said this here, 6 months later, he said this here. How do we connect that? And I think a lot of that post-event content expertise, none of us have.
Right.
And it sounds exhausting just thinking about what to do with it. But I feel like agencies like yours, Phenomenon, and others, I'm sure, are going to be helping companies and event companies figure that this post-event part out, because I think it's very important. Not just, we just said about content in a continuum. It builds a relationship with the audience, but also for next year's event as well. It serves as surely a marketing for that. So I think that's where a lot of the effort has to happen.
I think that makes a ton of sense. So the other thing that you and I discussed, by the way, when we were having that conversation, you mentioned something to me that resonated, and I think it's a challenge. So what you said was, I think everybody has to have a studio in their office to compete, was the idea about quality of content, and particularly from a virtual perspective. And then, of course, if you're going to run a hybrid event, it's more than a camera in a room. It's creating a stage. It's doing all those types of things. Well, how is Skift balancing aspiration with execution?
It's a great
what we can
question.
dream and what we can achieve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, keep in mind, we are the industry that's probably one of the most hurt industries in the world. So travel industry, event industry together, and we're just coming out of it. I mean, this year, and that's only in US and maybe a little bit in UK, because the rest of the world is still dealing with so many of these other things. So, in terms of, sorry, I lost my thought. What was the question again?
Well, the question is, how are you balancing, the dream? There's all these possibilities with online.
Correct.
So how are you balancing aspiration with what's, executable?
Yeah. So yesterday, this is a live example. Yes, we do an event at the end of the year called Design the Future. it's very much aspirational event focused on not just on travel, but influencers from all different parts of the industry on how do we look at the future with travel as the lens towards it. The person who's in charge of the company presented like a whole week of festivities that we could potentially do. We'll have physical and I think we can only do about 40% of what he presented today for this year because of the resources and with an idea that when the world, so this is a sort of an in-between year, which is why it's weird. By next year, hopefully, which we will have more resources and the world will be back more for us to be able to do a more aspirational event than we're currently doing. For us, and I think this is true for a lot of companies today, we're doing a lot more with a lot less in terms of resources, pandemic and, less staff. So for me, the first thing when I look at anything new we're doing is, can our staff bear the load to do a new thing? Or will this break our staff? So that's the first thing we do. And secondly, then we look at the reality is we need to pick a software and run with it. Don't just jump from like tool to tool to tool to tool, because it just is exhausting. Right. Exhausting for your audience, exhausting for your team. And so, for us, like with pick SpotMe, does it have everything that we need? Absolutely no. Does it have most of the things, and can we squeeze the best out of what we know? Yes. So we're going to run with that, as opposed to trying to do too many new things. So I think that's kind of how we look at it. It's very how much input do we have to have the maximum output based on the resources that we have. So that's how I look at it. Incremental improvements. We're adding a host to our conferences. Started with the virtual. We just did our event last month where first time a host was there, not just as a person who's reading script before every session starts, but a person who connects the dots. The CEO said this. Now we have a talk coming, and it'd be interesting to see how this person reacts to what this person said before.
Sure.
Or insights. So and we'll learn, I'm sure, what the host's role is in connecting the physical and the virtual audience. I think that's where at our Skift Global Forum will be the test of how we connect our physical and virtual audience. Do we know completely what that looks like? No, but I'm sure we'll learn.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. Okay, cool. So we're running towards the end, and I could talk to you about this for hours or five, but I know you have a schedule to keep as well. I wanted to grab at least one question from the audience.
Okay.
There's a couple coming in here. Let me see which one is going to be the best. Well, there's one fun one and one serious one. We'll see how quick the serious one goes. This is an important one. So, Maggie asks, in your career, what's the most consistently effective content tactic you've seen?
In terms, I think,
that's a broad question.
Yeah.
I'll try to narrow.
Email. Let me say this. Email.
Okay.
Email. Never underestimate the power of email. Pre-event, during event, post-event. Email newsletters have been the workhorse for, 25, 30 years, however many they've existed.
It's incredible.
And now, obviously, email newsletters are hot because of Substack and all the other, new things that have come up. Sure. But email newsletters have been around forever. Effectively using email and the content in that email is probably the most important thing to master.
I never get tired of the perennial "email is dead" blog post.
Correct.
From somebody in the inbound marketing world, and I always chuckle when I see it because I'm like, no, it's not.
But I mean, the amazing thing, we're running short of time, but it's amazing nobody talks about how spam has been conquered. In your inbox, how much spam do you get now? Only
the spam I sign up for.
Only the spam, meaning like people sign it, but the spam of like Nigerian prince type spam, it's all gone.
It's all gone.
It's all gone. It's there in your trash, but like the companies have become a lot smarter about that whole thing.
Yeah, I get more spam phone calls now than I get spam email. Like my phone rings harder for people that I don't want to talk to than my email.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I think we have time for one more. The team here is going to kill me, but we're going to go over just a little bit. I think that's okay. The other question was, because I love this question, what are the virtual/hybrid gimmicks that you've seen over the past year that work? And then what are the ones that people should stay away from? I have one example, which I'll save. I'm curious to see what you think.
Well, I mean, quickly, let me say the thing people shouldn't do: long online panels.
Okay.
People anywhere with more than 3 people, and anywhere more than 30 minutes that you and I are doing. In fact, our conferences, we typically stay between 20 and 25 minutes. Quick insights. If they can't say anything interesting in the first 20, 25 minutes, unlikely they're going to be saying anything interesting in the next hour if it's an hour and a half long thing.
Sure.
And so generally speaking, I would say it's just because you can do it in virtual, meaning long sessions and people are there, and maybe you can, you're doing a webinar, if it's just a one little thing. Time and time management does matter. Okay. And people, I think, forget that. What virtual gimmicks that work? I don't know. You go ahead.
Well, the ones that I think we agree that, like, in pursuing what you just explained not to do is actually what works. If you can keep your content short, which now I'm breaking that rule for 2 seconds, but if you can keep it short and keep people's attention for just long enough to provide that piece of value, and then move on from that, I think making the pace move forward is really important in a virtual environment. People sit at their desk, and now, by the way, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And so I think people need to respect that. The one gimmick that I think that does not work is trying to take physical elements from the physical world and turn them into virtual world.
Oh my God, you're talking about that virtual ballroom and all the other
yeah,
stuff?
like moving your little virtual avatar from room to room. It's just super not necessary.
Yeah, just not. No, I know a lot of companies are trying that, but I just don't think that works.
Agreed. Okay, well, is there anything you want to tell our audience? Places to come find you, what's coming up with EventMB or Skift?
Yeah, I think EventMB, if you go to Event Manager blog or eventmb.com, that's where you will get the latest insights, including insights from SpotMe, because we work closely with SpotMe as well. And we just had yesterday event. I forget the exact title, but Event Technologist Tech Summit, yes. And then I think a couple of others are coming up as well. So we'll continue to do that. So people in the event industry definitely sign up for that. And Skift is @Skift on Twitter or any other places. And thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Rafat. Thank you so much for being here. Audience, if you have other questions, drop them in on LinkedIn, tag SpotMe, and we'll try to get our attention and keep on the lookout for new content. We'll see you next time.